the point of Ahithophel's advice was, hey, let's send a decent number of troops that we can just mobilize right now, go there, strike David's forces while they're weak, take advantage of the current situation. Hushai is talking about assembling all the troops from the entire nation. That doesn't happen very quickly. While it might seem better because it's like, hey, we're going to overwhelm David's men with just sheer numbers, it's also giving David's men time to plan and recover and strategize potentially, because that would also give more time for word to get to David about what Absalom's men are planning. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so we are currently looking at 2 Samuel 17, and so for context, David is still technically king over Israel, although his son Absalom has whipped up a rebellion. David fled Jerusalem in order to kind of mitigate the damage. And so now Absalom is there in Jerusalem, and he is being advised to do things that, like, are showing signs of dominance, essentially, with Absalom in Jerusalem, kind of trying to show the people that he's in charge now, even though David is still alive and able to be called king. We'll have to see how all that progresses from there. But I think that's all we really need to know context-wise for this. If something else comes up that relies on past information I can recall, I will mention that as we go through the chapter. But here we go, 2 Samuel chapter 17. Now Ahithophel urged Absalom, "Let me choose 12,000 men to start out after David tonight. I will catch up with him while he is weary and discouraged. He and his troops will panic, and everyone will run away. Then I will kill only the king, and I will bring all the people back to you as a bride returns to her husband. After all, it is only one man's life that you seek. Then you will be at peace with all the people." This plan seemed good to Absalom and to all the elders of Israel. So Ahithophel is in the role of an advisor to Absalom. He actually filled a similar role for David, but David, I think he was one of the people that David asked to stay in Jerusalem with Absalom instead of going with him. I guess to, like, help him have some people on the inside so he could get information on what's going on and things like that. There's also somebody else who was an advisor type, or maybe even a priest, that he sent back there as well. I think we're about to get into him and what he might end up saying. But, so with David having fled, Ahithophel's like, hey, let's go send out a bunch of troops to chase down David and his men, and they're probably already worn out, and, you know, morale's probably low because of the current situation and them having to run. So let's try and get them while we probably have an advantage. But I won't, like, kill any more, or we won't kill any more people than we really need to. David's really the only one that you want to get rid of, so you don't have a challenge to the throne. And that all seemed like a good idea to Absalom and the elders. Note there, at the end of verse 3, that's how the Greek version reads. Hebrew reads, like the return of all is the man whom you seek. Okay. So rather than saying it's only one man's life that Absalom seeks to get rid of, to end, so saying like the return of all, I guess, is a way of saying a similar kind of thing, just maybe a bit more metaphorically, maybe a bit more poetically, you might say. Because we all return eventually to the dirt, the dust, whatever you want to call it. There's a somewhat common phrase in Christianity that's like something to the effect of, from dust you were born, and to dust you shall return. Essentially, it's another way of saying the same kind of thing, just with different wording and a bit more metaphorically. Point stands, he really only wants David gone. Okay. So now we'll get into verse 5. But then Absalom said, "Bring in Hushai the Archite. Let's see what he thinks about this." When Hushai arrived, Absalom told him what Ahithophel had said. Then he asked, "What is your opinion? Should we follow Ahithophel's advice? If not, what do you suggest?" "Well," Hushai replied to Absalom, "this time Ahithophel has made a mistake. You know your father and his men. They are mighty warriors. Right now they are as enraged as a mother bear who has been robbed of her cubs. And remember that your father is an experienced man of war. He won't be spending the night among the troops. He has probably already hidden in some pit or cave. And when he comes out and attacks, and a few of your men fall, there will be panic among your troops, and the word will spread that Absalom's men are being slaughtered. Then even the bravest of soldiers, though they have the heart of a lion, will be paralyzed with fear. For all Israel knows that knows what a mighty warrior your father is, and how courageous his men are." So it sounds like Hushai is suggesting, alright, let's just throw everything we've got at him so we can more easily overwhelm David and his men. I mean, that seems to be what's suggested. Maybe we'll read that more clearly later on. But he's like, hey, you know David and his men. They are strong. They're, experienced in battle. Like, we need to do as much as we can to make sure that we accomplish our goal here swiftly. If we really want to, have this be as smooth as possible. But let's continue reading what he advises in verse 11. "I recommend that you mobilize the entire army of Israel, bringing them from as far away as Dan in the north and Beersheba in the south. That way you will have an army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And I advise that you personally lead the troops. When we find David, we'll fall on him like dew that falls on the ground. Then neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. And if David were to escape into some town, you will have all Israel there at your command. Then we can take ropes and drag the walls of the town into the nearest valley until every stone is torn down." Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, "Hushai's advice is better than Ahithophel's." For the Lord had determined to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel, which really was the better plan, so that he could bring disaster on Absalom. Okay, so you might wonder, why would it say here that Ahithophel's plan was better? Hushai's advice doesn't sound bad. But that was half the point of him sending, of David sending Hushai back to Israel, was to give advice that conflicted with Ahithophel's kind of, try and stir up a bit of confusion. And the point of Ahithophel's advice was, hey, let's send a decent number of troops that we can just, have them mobilize right now, go there, strike David's forces while they're weak, kind of, take advantage of the current situation. Whereas Hushai is talking about assembling all the troops from the entire nation. That doesn't happen very quickly. At least, in the time that we're looking at here. There wasn't like the internet or other ridiculously quick means of communication across, wide areas. So it would have taken a while to send word out, to get everybody together in those different places, to have them travel to a specific meeting spot, to then organize them from there, and then be able to, go out and execute the plan. So Hushai's advice, while it might seem better because it's like, hey, we're going to overwhelm David's men with just sheer numbers, it's also giving David's men time to plan and recover and strategize potentially, because that would also give more time for word to get to David about what Absalom's men are planning. So that's why, from Absalom's perspective, Ahithophel's advice would have actually been the better advice to follow, because it wouldn't have given David's men time to recover or plan. But they go with Hushai's advice anyway because it sounds like it might be better. So then we get to verse 15. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, what Ahithophel said to Absalom and the elders of Israel, and what he himself had advised instead. Quick, he told them, find David and urge him not to stay at the shallows of the Jordan River tonight. He must go across at once into the wilderness beyond. Otherwise he will die, and his entire army with him. And there was no guarantee that they were still going to go with Hushai's advice. I mean, it seemed like, based on the past couple of verses, that was the plan they would go with. But, people change their minds sometimes. But Hushai here is basically saying, alright, you guys need to go tell David and his men what all has been mentioned here. Let him know the possibilities. Let him know that, hey, you need to get going, so then it'll be harder to find you, and, you'll have the ability to plan things out, knowing what the possibilities are on this end. This was kind of the main reason that David sent Hushai back, along with actually Zadok and Abiathar. They were priests that were going to leave Jerusalem with David, but he advised them to go back so he could have a few more men on the inside. Note there at Jordan River, Hebrews says, at the crossing points of the wilderness. So, the Jordan River was where they crossed over from the wilderness into the promised land. So, same place, probably just a different way of referring to it. Most likely. Alright. Verse 17. Jonathan and Ahimaaz had been staying at En-Rogel, so as not to be seen entering and leaving the city. Arrangements had been made for a servant girl to bring them the message they were to take to King David. But a boy spotted them at En-Rogel, and he told Absalom about it. So they quickly escaped to Bahurim, where a man hid them down inside a well in his courtyard. The man's wife put a cloth over the top of the well and scattered grain on it to dry in the sun, so no one suspected they were there. When Absalom's men arrived, they asked her, "Have you seen Ahimaaz and Jonathan?" The woman replied, "They were here, but they crossed over the brook." Absalom's men looked for them without success and returned to Jerusalem. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a sec. So, I guess more people that were kind of there as means of communication between Jerusalem and wherever David happened to be, which, as of this moment, would have been right around the Jordan River. So they were spotted. I assume En-Rogel was a little bit outside Jerusalem, maybe? And that's why they had to have someone go out to them to tell them what was up. But anyway, they got spotted, went to someplace else. They were hidden in a well that was then, used simultaneously for another purpose so as to look less suspicious. Drying grain. Just to make it look more normal. And then the woman doesn't say that she didn't see them, which could possibly be a little suspicious. But she instead was like, yeah, they were here, but they went that way to get his attention elsewhere. So the woman directs Absalom to go look somewhere else. Then we get to verse 21. Then the two men crawled out of the well and hurried on to King David. "Quick," they told him, "cross the Jordan tonight." And they told him how Ahithophel had advised that he be captured and killed. So David and all the people with him went across the Jordan River during the night, and they were all on the other bank before dawn. When Ahithophel realized that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey, went to his hometown, set his affairs in order, and hanged himself. He died there and was buried in the family tomb. Okay, that seems a bit of an overreaction, maybe, but it could have been, like, in his mind that he kind of knew at that point Israel was doomed, or something to that effect. I don't know. But, so the two men escape, they send word to David. Ahithophel realizes that his advice wasn't followed, and does all that stuff. Sometimes it just includes information like this to say, hey, this person was kind of important, here's how they died and what happened there. Okay, verse 24. David soon arrived at Mahanaim. By now, Absalom had mobilized the entire army of Israel and was leading his troops across the Jordan River. Absalom had appointed Amasa as commander of his army, replacing Joab, who had been commander under David. Amasa was Joab's cousin. His father was Jether, an Ishmaelite. His mother, Abigail, daughter of Nahash, was the sister of Joab's mother, Zeruiah. Absalom and the Israelite army set up camp in the land of Gilead. Okay, so David makes it, or David and his men make it to some town called Mahanaim that's on the other side of the Jordan River. Seems like Absalom's troops are about to catch up with them. Joab very likely wouldn't have been leading Absalom's troops, because I'm pretty sure he was still with David. But Absalom probably recognized that Joab was a good commander, and it would make sense in a way to, you know, have someone else from that family, because actually Joab had a couple of brothers who were also, you know, in higher positions within David's army at different times. At least one of them had died by this point, but side note. So Absalom gets somebody else from the family to lead his own troops. Father was Jether. Hebrew says Ithra. Variant spelling. Okay. Ancient Hebrew is weird as far as, especially compared with most modern languages, because, like, it technically doesn't even have vowels, so you might think, that looks totally different. How is that a variant spelling? But really, most likely what would be seen would be something resembling like a Y, maybe the TH and the R. But Y is sometimes rendered as a J, but sometimes might sound more like an I, or do it like a Y. Didn't actually have J's either. Yeah, I'm not 100%. I don't know for sure what all the details are of what ancient Hebrew didn't have letter-wise. So yeah, I can believe they didn't have J's either. So yeah, like I said, it might have looked more like a Y or something like that. So you compare Ithra to, probably, it could have even been pronounced more like Yether or Yeter. But yeah, it's because of the way ancient Hebrew was, yes, it is possible for Ithra to be a variant spelling of what we're reading here. Greek manuscripts say he was an Ishmaelite. Hebrew reads an Israelite. Okay, I mean, Israelite you would think would have been implied and wouldn't have needed to be stated outright. But, Ishmaelites were a little bit different because they were descended of a different son of Abraham. But still, in a way, related. Okay. Last block of verses here. Last paragraph. Verse 27. When David arrived at Mahanaim, he was warmly greeted by Shobai, son of Nahash, who came from Rabbah of the Amorites, and by Machir, son of Amiel from Lo-Debar, and by Barzillai of Gilead from Rogelim. Names, man. Anyway, they brought sleeping mats, cooking pots, serving bowls, wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans, lentils, honey, butter, sheep, goats, and cheese for David and those who were with him. For they said, "You must all be very hungry and tired and thirsty after your long march through the wilderness." So, there was previous mention of David having military victories over people of these regions, like the Ammonites. And in fact, he and a former king of the Ammonites, I think, had gotten along fairly well. It was because that king's son decided to be a jerk that there was conflict to begin with. So, these people were not looking for any trouble from David, or Israel in general. So, they welcomed him quite well, it seems, because of not wanting to cause any trouble, and or because of hearing good things about him and wanting to just be friendly in general. So, David makes it to Mahanaim, is given a warm welcome, and Absalom's troops are trying to chase him down, and that's where we leave things off for 2 Samuel 17. Alright, so it seems like the stage is set for the battle between, or the likely battle between David's men and Absalom's, which Absalom has seemingly most of Israel's troops, at least, on his side. But they're going to try and hit David full force, following Hushai's advice rather than Ahithophel's, just because it sounded better to be like, all right, let's strike them hard, and, you know, then we can wipe out threats to Absalom's rule. Meanwhile, it gave David time to get to what seems like a defensible spot, or at least a spot to hide for a little while and maybe plan some things. But whatever the case is, that's where we're going to pick things up next time. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel to see more videos as I post them. Look down in the description for info on social media pages, links to find and follow those, as well as a link to my relatively new supporter page. If you're wanting to financially support what I do, that's the place to go, at least for now. You can give just once, and it'll help with the current goal that I'm working towards to help me do more stuff in the future. You could also sign up for a membership, in which case you're not only helping me out, but you also get a little bit of a kickback, whether it be just like video shoutouts or Discord server access, other things like that. You'll see it all when you get there. So if any of that interests you, feel free to follow that link. It should be on Ko-fi.com, coffee.com. I don't know. I want to call it Coffee because the logo is a coffee mug. But like any of the tutorials that I saw on there that were talking about how to set things up, they pronounced it Ko-fi. So maybe it's Ko-fi. I don't know. Anyway, no big deal. Go there if you want to support what I'm doing. And of course, down below in the description, leave comments with any thoughts that you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, until next time, stay cool, people.